The Moscow Elite Boxing Academy fell silent. It was November 2019, and the temperature outside hovered at minus 15 degrees Celsius. But inside the heated training facility, tension made the air feel even thicker. Russian Olympic boxing coach Viktor Volkov, a man who had trained 3 world champions and 2 Olympic gold medalists, stood at the center of the ring with his arms crossed, staring down at the young man who had just walked through the gym doors. The Filipino visitor was shorter than everyone else in the room by at least 6 inches, his gym bag slung over one shoulder, his eyes calm but watchful. Viktor's heavyweight champion, Dmitry Kozlov, was scheduled to fight for the WBA title in 8 weeks. He needed sparring partners who could push him, test him, prepare him for the biggest fight of his career. The gym had already cycled through 5 sparring partners that month alone. Dmitry was 6 feet 4 inches tall, weighed 140 pounds of pure muscle, and hit like a freight train. Most sparring partners lasted 2 rounds before waving off, overwhelmed by his power and reach. Viktor needed someone who could survive at least 5 rounds, someone who could give Dmitry a real challenge. But when the Filipino visitor introduced himself as Miguel Santos, a boxing coach from Manila who happened to be in Moscow visiting family, Viktor's expression shifted from curiosity to dismissal in seconds. Miguel was 5 feet 6 inches tall, maybe 155 pounds soaking wet, with a wiry build that looked nothing like the heavyweight monsters Viktor was used to working with. His handshake was firm, his English accented but clear, and his demeanor respectful but not submissive. "I heard you're looking for sparring partners," Miguel said. "I've been training fighters in Manila for 12 years. I can help." Viktor glanced at Dmitry, who was wrapping his hands in the corner, then back at Miguel. A slow smile spread across Viktor's face, the kind of smile that wasn't warm but condescending. "You spar with Dmitry." He laughed, a deep barrel-chested sound that echoed off the gym walls. The other trainers and fighters stopped what they were doing to watch. "You're what, 5'6"? Maybe 55 kilos. This is heavyweight boxing, my friend. You belong in bantamweight, maybe featherweight. Go back to the little guys." Miguel didn't flinch. He'd heard this before. Growing up in Tondo, Manila, he'd been the smallest kid in every street fight, every underground match, every gym he'd ever walked into. But he'd also learned something the Russians didn't know yet, something passed down through generations of Filipino fighters, refined in back alleys and barangay squares, tested in the kind of fights where rules didn't exist and survival did. "I understand your concern, Coach," Miguel said evenly. "But size isn't everything. Let me show you what I mean." Viktor's smile faded into something sharper, more predatory. He looked at Dmitry, who had finished wrapping his hands and was now watching the exchange with interest. "Dmitry, you want to warm up? Let's give our Filipino friend here a lesson in heavyweight boxing." He turned back to Miguel. 3 rounds. If you last 3 rounds, I'll pay you for your time. If you don't, you leave and don't come back. Deal?" Miguel nodded. "Deal." The gym erupted in low murmurs and chuckles. Several fighters pulled out their phones, already anticipating the kind of footage that would make for good locker room entertainment later. A small Filipino guy getting ragdolled by a Russian giant, Viktor's assistant coach. A former cruiserweight named Sergey leaned over and whispered, "Viktor, he's too small. This is dangerous." Viktor waved him off. He asked for it. Maybe he learns respect for the sport. Miguel changed into his training gear, simple black shorts, a faded gray tank top, and well-worn boxing gloves that had seen hundreds of hours of use. He didn't wear headgear. He didn't ask for it. When he stepped into the ring, the size difference was almost comical. Dmitry looked like he could bench press Miguel without breaking a sweat. The Russian heavyweight stretched his shoulders, rolled his neck, and touched gloves with Miguel in the center of the ring. Viktor rang the bell. Dmitry came forward immediately, using his jab to establish range. His reach advantage was massive, nearly 8 inches longer than Miguel's. Every jab snapped out like a piston, measuring distance, setting up the right hand that would follow. Miguel slipped the first jab, leaned away from the second, and circled to his left. Dmitry followed, cutting off the ring with the kind of textbook footwork Viktor had drilled into him for years. Another jab. Miguel ducked under it and moved again. The crowd started murmuring. Miguel hadn't thrown a single punch yet. "Fight back," someone yelled from the sidelines. Dmitry pressed forward, throwing a combination jab. Jab, right cross. Miguel slipped the first two and pulled back just enough to let the cross whistle past his chin. The miss made Dmitry adjust, stepping in with a left hook to the body. This time Miguel didn't dodge. He stepped into the punch, smothering it with his elbow, and for the first time, Dmitry felt something strange, Miguel's hand tapping his ribs in a sharp, controlled strike that didn't look like a traditional boxing punch at all. It wasn't a hook. It wasn't an uppercut. It was something faster, sharper, almost like a knife strike. Dmitry blinked, confused. Viktor leaned forward from the corner, frowning. What was that? Miguel moved again, circling, his feet light and quick. Dmitry reset and came forward with more aggression, throwing a heavy right hand designed to test Miguel's chin. Miguel didn't block it. He redirected it, using his lead hand to guide Dmitry's punch past his head while simultaneously stepping to the outside angle. Before Dmitry could reset, Miguel's rear hand snapped out in a short, brutal strike to Dmitry's floating rib. The sound was sharp crack and Dmitry's breath hitched. His eyes widened. That hurt Dot a lot. The gym went quiet. Dmitry had been hit by some of the hardest punchers in the division. He'd sparred with former champions. But this was different. This wasn't just power. This was precision. Miguel had hit him in a spot most boxers didn't even target, a nerve cluster just below the rib cage that sent a lightning bolt of pain radiating through Dmitry's entire torso. Viktor stood up from his stool. What is he doing? Dmitry came forward again, this time more cautiously. He threw a jab to set up a right hand, but Miguel slipped inside, got too close for comfort and delivered a rapid-fire combination that didn't look like anything in the traditional boxing playbook. Short elbows disguised as hooks, hammer fists that grazed Dmitry's temple, open palm strikes to the solar plexus. Each one was legal under sparring rules, but none of them followed the rhythm Dmitry expected. By the end of round 1, Dmitry was breathing hard. Miguel looked like he'd barely started. Round 2 began, and Viktor gave Dmitry specific instructions. Stay long. Use your jab. Don't let him inside. Dmitry nodded and came out more disciplined, keeping Miguel at the end of his punches. For 30 seconds, it worked. Dmitry's jab kept Miguel at bay, and the Russian started to regain confidence. But then Miguel changed tactics. Instead of circling away from the jab, he moved into it, slipping under Dmitry's arm and emerging on the blind side. Before Dmitry could pivot, Miguel unleashed a devastating body shot, a short, twisting punch that dug deep into Dmitry's liver. Dmitry's legs buckled. He didn't go down, but he bent forward, gasping, his face pale. The pain was unlike anything he'd felt before, sharp, nauseating, paralyzing. Viktor jumped to his feet. Stop. Stop the round. But Miguel had already stepped back, hands raised, giving Dmitry space. The Filipino fighter wasn't here to injure. He was here to teach. Viktor climbed into the ring, his face red with a mixture of anger and confusion. "What the hell are you doing? What is this style?" Miguel pulled off his gloves and spoke calmly, his voice carrying across the silent gym. "It's called Panantukan, Filipino dirty boxing. It's what my grandfather taught me. And his grandfather taught him. We don't wait for a size to win. We use angles, timing, and knowledge of the body's weak points. You wanted to see if I could spar with heavyweights. I just showed you." Viktor stared at him for a long moment. Dmitry, still catching his breath, looked at Miguel with something that wasn't anger but respect. Slowly, Viktor extended his hand. "I was wrong. You're not too small. You're too smart for most fighters." The gym erupted in applause. Fighters who had laughed at Miguel now crowded around him, asking questions about his techniques, his training methods, his philosophy. Viktor, a man who rarely admitted mistakes, pulled Miguel aside after the session and said, "I want you to train with us. Not as a sparring partner. As a coach. Teach my fighters what you know." Miguel smiled. "I'd be honored." Over the next 8 weeks, Miguel integrated Panantukan principles into the Moscow Elite Boxing Academy's training regimen. He taught Dmitry how to fight on the inside, how to use subtle angles to neutralize the taller opponent's reach, how to target nerve clusters and weak points that most Western boxing systems ignored. When Dmitry stepped into the ring for his WBA title fight, he didn't just win, he dominated, using techniques that commentators called unorthodox and revolutionary. The sparring footage from that first day in Moscow went viral, racking up over 200 million views across social media platforms. Viktor's public apology and praise for Miguel became one of the most shared boxing clips of 2019. "I judged him by his size," Viktor said in an interview. "I should have judged him by his knowledge." The Filipinos have been perfecting combat for centuries. We in the West have a lot to learn. Miguel returned to Manila a hero. He didn't open a flashy gym or chase fame. He went back to training kids in Tondo, teaching them the same lessons his Lolo had taught him, that intelligence defeats size, that tradition holds wisdom, and that respect is earned not through arrogance but through skill. The lesson: never underestimate someone because they don't fit your expectations. The Filipino people have survived colonization, natural disasters, and centuries of being underestimated. They've learned to turn disadvantages into strategies, to use intelligence where others rely on brute force. Miguel Santos didn't need to be 6 foot to be a giant. He just needed to remember where he came from and trust in the knowledge passed down through generations.